The Young Hero and the Lost Wallet. A young black girl finds a wallet full of money on the street. Instead of keeping it, she tracks down the owner, an elderly white woman. It was one of those afternoons where the world seemed suspended between two extremes. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, thick enough to drown out the sun, and the streets were slick with the remnants of a recent downpour. Maya Thompson didn't mind the rain. In fact, it felt strangely comforting. She could walk through it unnoticed, her hood pulled tight over her curly hair, the sound of the rain muffling everything else. The city, with all its noise and chaos, seemed quieter now, like it was giving her space to breathe. She had just finished her shift at the corner store, a job that barely paid enough to cover her bus fare, let alone the rent for the small apartment she shared with her younger brother, Jamal. The money in her pocket was hardly enough to buy a decent meal, but it was something. It always felt like just enough to survive. Maya's life had been one of steady struggles, learning to navigate a world that didn't seem to care much about her or people like her. But she never complained. Complaining wasn't going to pay the bills. It wasn't going to feed Jamal. So, Maya kept her head down, did what she had to do, and made do with what she had. Today, though, was different. As she walked home, her sneakers slapping against the wet sidewalk, her thoughts wandered. She had been working at the store for 2 years now, and every day felt like a repeat of the last. There was nothing particularly special about today. It wasn't her birthday, it wasn't a holiday, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But for some reason, she had the feeling that something was about to change. She wasn't sure why she felt that way, but it was a nagging sense, like the universe was trying to tell her something she couldn't yet understand. Maya kicked a small pebble as she walked, watching it skip across the pavement. The rain had let up, leaving behind a damp chill in the air. She pulled her jacket tighter around her, thinking about the long walk ahead. Home was still a few blocks away, and her legs were starting to ache from the long day. She'd promised Jamal they'd have spaghetti for dinner, but she wasn't sure where the money for that was coming from. Maybe she'd find a few dollars in the bottom of her bag. Maybe she could stretch it. She always did. And then she saw it. At first, it was just a flash of something lying half hidden in a puddle, gleaming like it didn't belong in the street. Maya wasn't the type to notice things like that. She had learned long ago that life on the streets of her neighborhood wasn't about paying attention to things that didn't concern her. But this was different. She stopped in her tracks, her heart picking up its pace. The object was small, rectangular, and almost shiny despite the dull weather. It didn't look like trash. It didn't look like something someone had discarded. It looked valuable. Maya hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer, crouching down to get a better look. A wallet. A leather wallet, black with faint gold stitching along the edges, lying in the middle of the street like it had been dropped in haste. She could see the outline of something inside, the shape of cash, maybe, or cards. Her fingers twitched as she reached down to pick it up, the cold leather against her palm sending a shiver through her arm. She didn't know why, but her heart was racing now. Maya knew what this meant. She knew what most people would do in this situation. They'd take it. They'd pocket the money or swipe the credit cards. There was no one around. No one would know. It would be so easy. A quick glance around confirmed what she already knew. The street was empty. The few people who had been walking were long gone, and no one was watching. It was hers for the taking. Her mind flashed to Jamal, to the bills she couldn't pay, to the days when she had to choose between feeding herself or her brother. She could use this. She could fix so many things with a few $100s, or even just a couple of 20s. The thought was tempting, almost irresistible, but something held her back. Maya had been raised to believe in doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Her mom had always told her that integrity was everything. You can lose money, you can lose things, but you'll never lose your honor, her mother used to say. She'd heard it so many times that it had become a kind of mantra in her head, something that kept her grounded when the world around her seemed to be falling apart. But still, the temptation lingered. The wallet was right there, waiting to be taken. And yet, Maya couldn't bring herself to do it. Maybe it was the thought of the person who had lost it, someone out there in the world who was probably searching desperately for it. Maybe it was the way the wallet seemed to call to her, almost as if it had a story to tell. Maya stood there, looking at it, her fingers still hovering above it. Her heart was still pounding, her breath coming a little quicker now, but she made up her mind. With a quiet sigh, she closed her fingers around the wallet and lifted it. No, she wasn't going to keep it. She wasn't going to let herself do that. She'd find the owner and she'd return it. It was the right thing to do. But then another thought struck her. How was she going to find the owner? The wallet was a nice one, clearly not cheap, but there was no name, no phone number, nothing that would give her a clue as to who it belonged to. Maya stared at it for a moment, considering. She could go to the police, she supposed, but they wouldn't care much. They'd take it, but it would probably just end up in lost and found, eventually forgotten. That wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to do more than that. She wanted to return it properly, to give it back to the person who had lost it. She felt an odd sense of purpose now, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know why, but she couldn't just let this go. This was her chance to do something right, something bigger than herself. She could make a difference, even if it was just in this small way. Her eyes flicked over the wallet again, and that was when she noticed the license inside it, tucked neatly next to the cash. She slid it out and looked at the name printed on it. Elizabeth Stevens. Maya turned the wallet over in her hands, hoping for some other clue, but there was nothing more. Just the name. Elizabeth Stevens. Who was she? What was she like? Where could she be? Maya had no idea, but she was determined to find out. Maya stood on the sidewalk, the wallet still clutched tightly in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that finding this wallet was more than just a random occurrence. It had to mean something. She wasn't sure what yet, but she could feel it deep down. This was a sign. This was her chance to do something good in a world that often seemed indifferent to her struggles. She glanced down at the piece of paper she had pulled from the wallet. Elizabeth Stevens. The name was simple, elegant even, but it didn't tell her much about who the woman was. Maya's mind raced as she tried to think of ways she could track this person down. There were no other clues. No phone number, no address. Nothing except the name. But Maya wasn't one to give up easily. If there was a way to find out who Elizabeth Stevens was, she was going to do it. She couldn't let it go, not after everything she had been through in her own life. This was a sign, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. She started by walking back down the street, her feet carrying her automatically toward the bus stop. Maybe there was a clue at the local businesses, someone who might know her or at least recognize the name. Maybe there was some small detail she could work with, anything to help her on her search. She wasn't sure where she was going, but she knew she had to keep moving. Maya walked past the familiar rows of houses, the cracked sidewalks, and the tired-looking storefronts. She had walked these streets 1,000 times before, but today they felt different. Today, everything felt more significant. There was a sense of urgency in her steps, and a quiet excitement mixed with the anxiety of not knowing where to start. She reached the bus stop and sat down on the metal bench, feeling the chill of the wet seats against her legs. The bus was due any minute, but Maya didn't care. She wasn't going to take the bus today. She had a mission now, and it didn't involve sitting on a bus, heading back to her small apartment with her brother. No, today she was going to find Elizabeth Stevens. She had to. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. "Excuse me," said a man, stepping up to her. "Are you looking for someone?" Maya looked up, surprised. The man was middle-aged, with a slight graying beard and glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He was dressed in a business suit, a stark contrast to the casual attire most people wore around here. I'm looking for someone," Maya replied hesitantly. "A woman named Elizabeth Stevens. I found her wallet." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, a look of curiosity crossing his face. "Elizabeth Stevens?" he repeated. "That's a bit unusual. What are you going to do with it?" I want to return it," Maya said, holding the wallet up. "It just feels wrong to keep it." The man studied her for a moment, as though weighing her words. Then, without saying anything further, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notepad. He scribbled something down on it before tearing off the page and handing it to Maya. "There's an address," he said simply. "You might want to try it. I'm not sure if it's her exact place, but it's a start." Maya took the slip of paper with a grateful nod. She wasn't sure why the man had helped her, but she didn't question it. She stood up, thanked him, and started walking in the direction of the address he had given her. The street she walked down was different from her own neighborhood. The buildings were newer, better maintained, and the sidewalks were wide and clean. It was a world away from the cracked sidewalks and faded storefronts she was used to. As she walked, she couldn't help but feel out of place. Everything about this neighborhood screamed wealth and privilege, two things Maya had never experienced much of in her life. She arrived at the address, a tall, elegant townhouse with a well-manicured lawn and a wrought iron gate. The name Stevens was etched into a small brass plaque next to the doorbell. Maya stood there for a moment, looking up at the house, her heart racing. This was it. This was where Elizabeth Stevens lived. She hesitated, unsure of what to do next. She had never been to a place like this before, and the thought of knocking on the door of a stranger's home felt strange, even intimidating. What if the woman didn't believe her? What if she thought Maya was trying to steal from her, or that she had some ulterior motive? Maya swallowed her nerves and walked up to the door. Her hand hovered over the doorbell for a moment before she pressed it. The sound of the chime echoed through the air, and Maya stepped back slightly, waiting. There was a pause, and then the door opened. Standing in front of her was an older woman, with silver hair pulled back into a neat bun. She had kind eyes, but there was also a trace of wariness in her expression. "Yes," the woman asked, her voice calm but firm. Maya took a deep breath. "Hi, I'm Maya. I found your wallet. It was on the street, and I thought you might want it back." The woman's eyes flickered to the wallet in Maya's hand, and for a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she stepped aside, motioning for Maya to come in. "Come in," she said softly. "Let's talk." Maya stepped inside, feeling an odd sense of relief wash over her. The house was warm, filled with the smell of something baking in the kitchen. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and there were photos of family members on the walls. It was quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the streets outside. "Thank you for bringing this back," the woman said, leading Maya to a small sitting room. "You must have had quite a walk." Maya nodded, feeling a bit nervous under the woman's gaze. She wasn't sure how to act around someone like this, someone who seemed so different. But the woman didn't seem judgmental. In fact, she seemed genuinely grateful. I wasn't sure who to give it to, Maya said, holding out the wallet. I didn't want to just leave it with the police or something. The woman smiled faintly, taking the wallet from Maya's hands. That's very kind of you, she said. Most people would have kept it for themselves. But you did the right thing. Maya shrugged, feeling a little awkward. It didn't feel right to take it. The woman's eyes softened. Not many people would agree with you. You'd be surprised how easy it is to justify keeping something that doesn't belong to you. Maya felt a strange warmth in her chest at the woman's words. There was something comforting about her, something that made Maya feel like she wasn't as out of place here as she had first thought. I'm Elizabeth Stevens, the woman said, holding out her hand. And you are? Maya Thompson, Maya replied, shaking her hand. I can't thank you enough for returning this to me. Maya, Elizabeth said, her voice sincere. It's rare to find someone with such integrity these days. Maya wasn't sure how to respond to that. It felt odd, hearing someone praise her for something she thought was just the right thing to do. But she smiled anyway, grateful for the warmth in Elizabeth's voice. Would you like some tea? Elizabeth asked. It's the least I can do. Maya nodded, relieved by the offer. She had no idea what she expected when she came here, but this wasn't it. This was different. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be different for her. As they settled into the cozy sitting room, Elizabeth led Maya to a comfortable chair by the fireplace. Maya felt a little out of place in the grand room, but Elizabeth's warmth put her at ease. She had been offered tea, and though she wasn't used to such hospitality, she accepted. Elizabeth made the tea with a practiced hand, her movements slow and deliberate as she prepared the cups. Maya watched, unsure of what to say. The silence between them was neither awkward nor uncomfortable, but it felt like there was a moment of understanding in the air, something that neither of them needed to put into words just yet. Elizabeth poured the tea and handed a cup to Maya. The steam curled up from the cup, and Maya inhaled the warm, calming scent. She took a small sip, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, Maya said quietly, looking down at the cup in her hands. Elizabeth settled into the chair across from her, her eyes studying Maya intently. After a few moments of silence, Elizabeth spoke, her voice gentle but steady. You know, Maya, most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have taken the money and never looked back. So many times, I've seen people make decisions based on what's easiest in the moment. But you did what was right. Maya hesitated. Her mind flickered to all the people she had known back home, those who would have taken the money without a second thought. It was hard not to feel like an outsider in this beautiful home, surrounded by wealth and comfort. I'm not so sure I'm special, Maya replied, her voice soft. I just couldn't bring myself to take it. But you're right. Could have been so easy. Elizabeth smiled knowingly. It's not about what you could have done. It's about what you did do. You chose a different path, one that takes strength. There are so many in this world who take the easy route, but the hard route is where the real change happens. It's where true character is built. Maya looked up at her, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I don't really know what I'm doing here. In this school, in this world. I've never been around people like these students. They all seem to have it figured out, and I'm just trying to catch up. Elizabeth's gaze softened. I understand how you feel. When I first started, I was just like you. I came from humble beginnings too. I didn't fit into the world I was in, and I often doubted if I belonged. But it's not about fitting into a place. It's about making your place in the world. You've already done that in a way just by being here, by making the choice to return that wallet. Maya lowered her gaze, absorbing the words. It felt like a weight lifted off her shoulders, the doubt that had been gnawing at her slowly fading. Still, a question lingered on her mind. But how do I keep going? How do I keep up when it feels like I don't belong? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elizabeth leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto Maya's. By remembering why you're here, Maya. You're here not just for yourself, but for all the people who might never get a chance like you did. The world doesn't need more people who blend in. It needs people who stand out, who do what's right even when no one's watching. That's where change happens. One step at a time, you'll make your mark. Just trust that you have everything inside of you to succeed. Don't let fear tell you otherwise. Maya felt a stirring deep within her. A quiet strength she hadn't known was there. It wasn't the kind of strength that came from winning or being praised. It was the kind that came from staying true to herself, even in the face of doubt and fear. Thank you, Maya said, her voice stronger now, filled with a sense of newfound resolve. I think I understand now. Elizabeth nodded, a proud smile curving her lips. You will do great things, Maya. I have no doubt. They sat there for a while, the sound of the rain tapping gently against the windows. The warmth of the tea lingered between them, a symbol of the connection they had forged in that small, quiet moment. Maya had come here not knowing what to expect, but now, as she looked at Elizabeth, she realized that sometimes the simplest acts, like returning a lost wallet, could change the course of a life. And with that, Maya knew she was ready for the next step. Maya had never imagined that a simple decision, one that seemed so small at the time, could change her life in ways she could never have anticipated. She had returned the wallet, and in doing so, had opened a door to a world she barely recognized. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind, each one passing in a blur of uncertainty, excitement, and sometimes fear. After that first meeting with Elizabeth Stevens, things moved quickly. Elizabeth had insisted on helping Maya in a way Maya hadn't expected. She offered her a scholarship to a prestigious school, one that Maya had only ever heard of in passing but never dreamed of attending. It was a gift that felt like a blessing, but also like a weight, a responsibility Maya hadn't anticipated. How could she, someone who had barely scraped by for so long, fit into a world where people lived in mansions and drove expensive cars? How could she possibly measure up to the students who had everything? But Elizabeth had been firm. She believed in Maya, and that belief was what gave her the courage to step into a new world, even when every part of her wanted to retreat into the comfort of what she knew. When the acceptance letter arrived, Maya had stared at it for a long time, unsure of what to feel. Her mother would have been so proud. She could almost hear her voice, telling her to seize the opportunity, to make the most of it. But her mother wasn't here anymore. She had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Maya to take care of Jamal and figure out how to survive in a world that didn't always make sense. There had been so many times when Maya had felt like giving up. But now, with this scholarship, she had a chance to change everything. Her first day at the new school was nothing like she had imagined. The building itself was massive, an imposing structure of stone and glass that felt like a fortress. The students walking around the campus seemed so different from her, dressed in expensive clothes, Their conversations filled with names of places and things Maya didn't understand. She felt like an outsider, like someone who didn't belong in this world. When she walked into the main building, the halls felt too bright, too pristine. There was an air of perfection here that made Maya uncomfortable. It wasn't just the luxury, it was the distance. Everyone seemed so far away from her, as if they existed in a world she couldn't touch. But Maya had promised herself that she would give it her best shot. She couldn't back out now, not after everything Elizabeth had done for her. She had to prove herself not just to the people here, but to herself. She could do this. She just had to keep pushing forward. Her first few weeks were difficult. She struggled to keep up with the work, finding herself in over her head more than once. The subjects were advanced, and she often had trouble understanding the lessons. But Elizabeth had taught her something important: perseverance. Maya wasn't someone who gave up easily. She stayed late after class, asking questions and working through problems until they made sense. She was determined to succeed. As the weeks passed, Maya started to find her footing. She began to make friends, though it wasn't always easy. Some students were kind, genuinely interested in her background and her story, while others were distant, not quite sure how to approach someone who was so different from them. But Maya wasn't here to fit in. She was here to learn, to grow, and to prove that she belonged. One day, a few months into the school year, Maya found herself sitting at lunch with a group of students she had started to get to know. They were talking about their weekend plans, parties, trips, and events Maya had never even heard of. She listened quietly, trying to follow along, but feeling like an outsider in their conversations. Then, one of the girls, a tall blonde named Katie, turned to her. "So, Maya, what's your story? What do you like to do for fun?" Maya hesitated. The truth was, she didn't have much of a social life. Her days were consumed with studying and taking care of Jamal when she wasn't at school. She had never been the type to go to parties or hang out with friends in the way these students seemed to. "I don't really go out much," Maya said slowly. "I usually spend my weekends studying or helping my brother with schoolwork." Katie raised an eyebrow. "That's different. You're not into the whole party scene, then?" Maya shook her head. "Not really. I have other things to focus on." The conversation moved on, but Maya couldn't help feeling the weight of their words. She was different, and it wasn't just about her background. It was the way she approached life. She had always been more serious, more focused. The carefree attitude of her peers was something she couldn't quite understand, and it made her feel like there was an invisible wall between them. As the weeks went on, Maya began to find her place in small ways. She joined a study group for one of her more difficult classes, and to her surprise, she became one of the top students in the group. She found a quiet confidence in herself, realizing that the things she had learned growing up, the perseverance, the work ethic, and the determination, were strengths, not weaknesses. But it wasn't all easy. Maya had moments of doubt, times when she wondered if she was really cut out for this life. There were moments when she felt like giving up, when the pressure of living in two different worlds, her old world and this new one, became too much. But then she remembered why she was here. She remembered Elizabeth's belief in her, and that belief became her anchor. One day, while sitting in the library, working on an essay, she overheard a conversation between two girls at a nearby table. They were talking about a leadership position in one of the school's community outreach programs. Maya wasn't paying much attention at first, but then she heard her name. "Have you heard of Maya Thompson?" one of the girls asked. "She's the new girl who's been killing it in that study group. I heard she's super smart." The other girl nodded. Yeah, I heard she's also helping with the after-school tutoring program. They say she's really dedicated. Maybe we should ask her to get involved with the leadership team. Maya blinked, surprised by the mention of her name. She had never considered herself a leader, but the idea of helping others, of giving back, was something that resonated deeply with her. She had always wanted to make a difference, and maybe this was the way she could do it. She spent the next few weeks working with the team, planning events and tutoring younger students. It felt good to give back, to be part of something bigger than herself. Slowly, she started to build a reputation not just as a hard worker, but as someone who genuinely cared about the community. And then, one afternoon, as she was preparing for an upcoming event, Elizabeth Stevens showed up at the school. Maya hadn't seen her in weeks, and when she saw her standing by the front gates, she felt a surge of gratitude and excitement. Elizabeth walked up to her with a warm smile. "Maya, I just wanted to see how you're doing. How's everything going? How's school?" Maya smiled, her heart full. "It's going really well. It's hard, but I'm managing. I've been getting involved with a tutoring program and even helping plan some events. Feels good to give back." Elizabeth's eyes sparkled with pride. "I knew you could do it," she said, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you." Maya felt a lump in her throat. "I couldn't have done it without you. You gave me this chance, and I'll never forget it." Elizabeth smiled gently. "You earned it, Maya. You always had it in you. You just had to believe in yourself." And in that moment, Maya realized something. She didn't need to fit into anyone else's world. She had created her own, a world where kindness, integrity, and hard work mattered. A world where she could make a difference. And it all started with a simple act of returning a lost wallet. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support more powerful storytelling like this. And don't stop there. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next video. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below to let us know how this story impacted you or what you'd like to see next. Your feedback helps us create meaningful content that connects with you. Thank you for being a part of our community. Your voice matters,